Yuri Hyuga bursts onto the scene in Shadowhearts, a man introduced mid-execution of his own vengeance that immediately establishes him as one of gaming's most compelling anti-heroes. From his first appearance aboard the Doom train, where he casually dispatches soldiers while cracking dark jokes, the game presents us with a protagonist who defies RPG conventions. He's not a wide-eyed youth on a journey of self-discovery, but a hardened survivor whose humor masks profound damage. This introduction perfectly encapsulates Yuri's entire character arc. The way he holds Alice at gunpoint only to immediately protect her, his casual brutality towards enemies juxtaposed with unexpected tenderness toward the innocent, and his immediate willingness to fuse with demons despite obvious toll it will take on him. That opening sequence plants every seed that will grow throughout the narrative. His self-loathing, his protective instincts, his reckless courage, and the fundamental contradiction of a man who believes himself a monster, yet can't stop acting like a hero. That opening sequence plants every seed that will grow throughout the narrative. His self-loathing, his protective instincts, his reckless courage, and the fundamental contradiction of a man who believes himself a monster, yet can't stop acting like a hero. The genius of Yuri's introduction lies in how it shows rather than tells. Through his actions alone, we understand he is someone who has been hurt too much to trust, but who still can't quite manage to stop caring, setting up the central tension that will define his entire journey. From that moment forward, every story beat, every character interaction, every supernatural struggle becomes about whether this damaged man will succumb to his darkness or find redemption through the connections he pretends not to need. Yuri's most defining strength is his sheer refusal to surrender, no matter how hopeless the situation. Unlike typical heroes who rely on idealism, Yuri's resilience is born from suffering. He has already endured the worst the world can throw at him, yet he keeps fighting. This is exemplified in his confrontation with Albert Simon in the graveyard, where Simon impales him with a deadly attack, taunting him as a failed experiment. Most would die from such a wound, but Yuri, fueled by rage and sheer stubbornness, forces himself back up and continues fighting. Later in the graveyard, he faces manifestations of his deepest fears, his past failures, his monstrous transformations, and instead of crumbling, he forges ahead, proving his mental fortitude is as strong as his physical power. Despite his gruff demeanor, Yuri inspires fierce loyalty in others precisely because he doesn't try to be a traditional hero. He doesn't give grand speeches or pretend to be selfless, but when it matters, he proves he'll go to hell and back for those he cares about. His bond with Alice is the clearest example. He starts off treating her like a nuisance, but when she's kidnapped, he tears through the pseudo-sex forces without hesitation, even when outnumbered. His willingness to stand up for Keith Valentine, a former friend turned enemy, shows his refusal to abandon people, even when they've betrayed him. Keith repeatedly tries to kill him, yet Yuri doesn't retaliate with lethal force, showing a restraint that underscores his underlying personality. Yuri isn't just strong, he's cunning. He assesses threats quickly and adjusts his tactics, whether in battle or in navigating the political intrigue surrounding the Emigre manuscript. When Dewey tries to manipulate him with illusions in Shanghai, Yuri initially falls for the trick, but instead of panicking, he uses the deception against Dewey himself, turning the fight around. Similarly, his ability to switch between different demonic fusions mid-combat reflects his strategic mind. He doesn't just overpower enemies, he outthinks them. This adaptability makes him unpredictable, a trait that even formidable foes like Roger Bacon underestimate at their peril. What truly elevates him as a protagonist is that his strength isn't just physical, it's emotional. He doesn't hide his pain, his fear, or his rage. When Alice is in danger, he doesn't calmly strategize, he rages. He fights recklessly. He nearly loses control. This raw vulnerability makes his victories more impactful. In the bad ending, for example, where he sacrifices himself to save Alice, his willingness to die for her isn't portrayed as a noble martyrdom. It's a tragic, messy, and deeply human experience. Even in the best ending, his growth isn't about becoming a flawless hero, it's about learning to accept help and trust others. As seen when he finally opens up to Alice about his past. Yuri is a protagonist defined as much by his weakness as his strengths. His psychological scars, impulsive nature, and self-destructive tendencies create constant obstacles in his quest. Where traditional JRPG heroes triumph through unwavering resolve, Yuri's path is messier, marked by setbacks that stem directly from his personality flaws. These vulnerabilities don't just humanize him, they actively drive the narrative's conflicts, forcing him to confront his limitations in ways that make his eventual growth, or downfall, all the more impactful. His past judgment left him psychologically fractured, and this damage manifests itself in ways that undermine his mission. His survivor's guilt over the village's destruction and Kurando's death isn't just backstory. It's an open wound that clouds his judgment. When Alice is kidnapped by Albert Simon, Yuri doesn't strategize, he charges in recklessly, ignoring allies and nearly getting himself killed in his rage. This isn't heroic determinism, it's self-sabotage. His nightmares and hallucinations, like the voices of demons taunting him, aren't merely aesthetic. They distract him at critical moments, such as when Dewey exploits his mental turmoil with illusions. Where a more stable hero might resist, Yuri falters and the plot bends around these failures. Alice's capture, the party's temporary disbandment, and even the bad ending all trace back to moments where his trauma overrides his logic. His lone wolf mentality isn't just a character quirk, it's a tactical flaw that backfires repeatedly. Early on, he dismisses Margaret's intel at the Kudo sect, leading to an ambush that could have been avoided. He refuses to explain his harmonizer abilities to Alice, leaving her vulnerable when his transformations frighten her. Even in combat, his instinct to fight alone puts him in a disadvantage. Against the four devas, he's overwhelmed until the party intervenes. His stubborn independence isn't strength, it's a refusal to acknowledge that he can't survive without others. The narrative punishes this flaw when he finally learns to rely on allies, like in the fight against the Seraphic Radiance. It's a hard-won revelation, not an innate trait. The fusion abilities he possesses grant him immense strength, but the game frames them as physical and moral weakness. Each transformation risks eroding his humanity, a theme hammered home by Keith's taunts. "You're already a monster," and Alice's fear of his demonic forms. This isn't just lore, it directly impacts the story. In Vladivostok, after overusing fusion, Yuri collapses from exhaustion, forcing the party to carry him to safety. In the graveyard, his dependency on power nearly gets him killed when his own demons turn against him. Even his final victory hinges on whether he can master his darkness without being consumed by it, a struggle the bad ending shows he can lose. Unlike heroes who fight for a brighter future, Yuri is motivated by atonement, a weakness villains exploit. Albert Simon manipulates this, framing Alice's kidnapping as punishment for Yuri's existence. This guilt leads him to make a reckless bargain, like offering his life to save Alice, instead of seeking smarter solutions. In the bad ending, his willingness to die isn't noble, it's the culmination of his inability to believe he deserves to live. Even in the best outcome, his growth is partial. He stops seeking death but remains haunted, a reminder that some flaws can't be fully overcome. Yuri Hyuga's explosive debut in Shadowhearts served as the perfect bridge between Kudelka's cult classic status and mainstream PS2 success, transforming what could have been remembered as an experimental oddity into the foundation of a beloved franchise. Where Kudelka's Victorian Gothic tone and hybrid survival horror RPG mechanics initially alienated some players, Yuri's introduction as a brooding yet darkly charismatic anti-hero, armed with some modern attitude, visceral combat prowess, and a tragic backstory, provided the accessible anchor the series needed to thrive in the PS2 era. His harmonixer abilities took the supernatural elements that made Kudelka unique and amplified them into a dynamic tone, visually striking combat system that showcased the console's capabilities, while his morally gray personality and mature storyline resonated with an audience growing weary of traditional JRPG idealism. By retaining Kudelka's signature blend of psychological horror and historical fantasy, but filtering it through Yuri's more immediately compelling personal journey, Shadowhearts gave players an emotional through line that made the series' darker themes and unconventional mechanics feel purposeful rather than alienating. In this way, Yuri didn't just carry a torch from Kudelka, he transformed it into a blazing fire that illuminated the series' potential, proving that complex narratives and flawed protagonists could thrive in an era dominated by more polished but conventional RPGs. His success as a character ultimately validated Kudelka's bold creative risks by demonstrating how their ideas could evolve into something both critically acclaimed and commercially viable, ensuring the survival of the franchise's distinctive identity in a competitive market. Thank you so much for listening, dear viewer. Subscribe, share, and comment telling me what is your favorite scene of Yuri or who you believe is the best hero of Shadowhearts, and what you want to see in the next video. Goodbye.